Right now, our world is being held hostage, and this is the bargaining chip: oil. Oil powers our entire planet, but the economy of black gold is run by a tiny handful of nations who have the power to control its global price as well as its supply. Nations that include Venezuela and the oil-rich kingdoms of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Currently, the OPEC oil cartel is creating a global oil crisis, resembling a similar situation from the 1970s, effectively starting an economic war with the United States and forcing the US to take serious emergency actions that could have ripple effects on our everyday lives. So I'm sure that you are aware that petrol prices have gone up quite a lot in the last year, and there is some bad news. It appears that it's going to continue rising, and to explain why, I'm going to start our story in the United States. This is the United States Strategic Petroleum Reserve, otherwise known as the SPR. The SPR is made up of several massive reserves of oil, stored in huge underground salt caverns in 4 locations on the US Gulf Coast. With the capacity to store around 700 million barrels of oil, it was designed as the country's emergency store of oil that it could use in times of great need, like if a war was to ever break out, or if we need to make up for a serious oil deficit in order to keep the nation running. Now, the SPR has only existed for about 50 years, and the reason it was created in the first place was almost an exact mirror as to what is happening in our world today. In the 1970s, the world experienced a severe oil crisis, a crisis that was created by OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. After the Yom Kippur War, OPEC wanted to punish any nations that supported Israel in the conflict, and one of those nations was the United States. Due to OPEC controlling most of the world's oil at the time, this shortage created incredible global demand, causing oil prices to almost triple almost overnight. This made the US realize just how reliant it was on foreign oil, creating the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in 1977 as a stockpile of emergency oil for the United States. The SPR is extremely important in this story, and I'll come back to it in just a moment. However, now I want to focus on OPEC because it seems like it's returning to its old tricks, because it has just declared that it is going to restrict the world's oil supply. Starting in November, OPEC will be restricting its oil supply, according to the announcement, by 2 million barrels per day. This amounts to a little over 2% of what our planet uses on a daily basis. In reality, this doesn't sound like much. However, it will likely have a significant effect on global oil prices. OPEC's reason for doing this is simple. As they say, to stabilize prices, or in other words, to bring the cost back up after a recent slump, a move that will put billions more in profits in the oil cartel's pockets. Now, here's the thing. A few years ago, OPEC raising its prices wouldn't have had an effect on the United States. However, this is a much different story with the way that things stand today. The United States is the world's single biggest producer of oil, but collectively, OPEC is much bigger, meaning it has incredible power to manipulate oil prices. The US knew this after the crisis in the 1970s, which is why for decades it's been doing all it can to become self-reliant for its oil needs. In 2018, under Donald Trump, the United States became a net exporter of oil for the first time in decades. By some reports, the first time this has happened in 75 years. In short, the country was producing more oil than it needed, meaning it didn't need to rely on the outside world for oil. However, this isn't the case today. The reasons for the deficit are complicated, but primarily are the result of climate action taken by Joe Biden's government. Whatever the cause, the simple reality is this: the US currently uses more oil than it produces, right now creating around 15 million barrels of oil daily, while using more than 19 million barrels per day. This deficit of nearly 5 million barrels per day means the US now can't function without getting oil from abroad, leaving it open to heavy manipulation by OPEC. In short, OPEC has the United States bent over a barrel when it comes to oil, and that means as a result, the rest of us are getting screwed over this as well. And although OPEC is making this happen, the real puppet master when it comes to this economic conflict is Saudi Arabia, who have been pulling the strings of OPEC's actions from the start. Since it was founded in 1960, Saudi Arabia has been the de facto leader of OPEC. The nation is an absolute monarchy, and its rulers, the House of Sword, are some of the richest people on earth. The family rules the kingdom with an iron fist. Just like China, the Saudi government heavily monitors internet usage, mostly so that it can censor dissidents and maintain political and religious power. But the Saudis would find it a lot more difficult to monitor the internet if citizens were to hide their online usage. And personally, my favorite way of staying hidden online is through the use of NordVPN, the sponsor of today's video. I'm a really strong believer in online privacy, which is why I take take using a VPN so seriously. With NordVPN, I can hide my browsing data with just a single click, and they keep my online data private with top-tier encryption. Nord also allows me to choose from more than 5,600 servers around the world to get around any geo-targeted content blocks. And unlike other VPNs, Nord doesn't slow down my surfing either, because as verified by independent testing, it is the fastest VPN on Earth. The best part? You can try NordVPN completely risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And you can also get 4 months free access by signing up today at nordvpn.com/Sorel. There is a link in the bio. Okay, now back to the video. So I did promise I'd talk about SPR once again, and this is the point in the video where I bring them back into the conversation. Since it was created, oil has been removed from the SPR only 3 times. In 1980, 1991, and 2011, all during times of crisis. For example, during the first Gulf War, and again after Hurricane Katrina hit. However, oil has been once again flowing out of the SPR for almost a year. Over the last 11 months, Joe Biden has signed off a significant removal of oil from the SPR and has just announced his government will be taking another 15 million barrels out. But this time, the reason isn't because of a major crisis. It's simply to keep gas prices low for the American people. So far, 26% of the US emergency oil reserves have been depleted, taking them down to their lowest levels since 1980. A move that Forbes has called dangerous because of the precarious positions it puts the United States in, and because of how it gives OPEC even more power to manipulate the market. This is all because OPEC wants the US to become its biggest customer. The United States consumes more oil than any other country on Earth. So the bigger its oil deficit becomes, the more oil it will have to buy from OPEC, putting billions of dollars into pockets of the world's major oil cartels. In short, OPEC has a vested interest in making sure the US uses as much of its emergency reserve as possible. But OPEC's actions won't just affect the US. Its restricting of oil will drive up fuel prices for the entire world. So, does the US have any power in order to fight back against OPEC's manipulation? Well, not really. But this could be all about to change, as Biden's government is possibly planning to make old threats towards OPEC a reality. To fight against OPEC, the US is proposing the creation of NOPEC, the No Oil Producing and Exporting Cartels Act, a set of laws first introduced in 2007 that would mean the US could punish OPEC for manipulating the oil market. NOPEC laws didn't end up being enacted in 2007. However, the US government has now moved to implement them today. A few years ago, the legislation officially moved to the Senate and is due to be voted on soon. And unlike the gold standard bill we mentioned in last week's video, the NOPEC laws have a good chance of being passed, as they have support from across the aisle from both Republicans and Democrats. If passed, these laws would have real power, making capping the production of oil or fixing oil prices completely illegal, possibly resulting in heavy sanctions against OPEC nations. And considering controlling oil prices like this is the main reason OPEC was created in the first place, it could make the organization useless. Hypothetically, it could also mean that Saudi Aramco, the biggest oil producer in the world, might be broken up, something that would seriously damage the power of Saudi Arabia, the nation that profits most from Aramco. Long story short, what's happening right now is effectively a war over oil, just being fought with economics and laws instead of with weapons. However, just like every single war out there, there are always casualties. And in this case, it is basically every normal person on the planet. Like it or not, dinosaur juice is intertwined with our economy in every possible way. It's essential for you to get to work or to ship your products to customers. Without it, food would quickly disappear from supermarket shelves. International travel would cease to exist, and every product in society that contains plastic would be no more. Because of this, OPEC's oil war won't just increase its profits, it will drive up the cost of literally everything in society, resulting in us effectively all becoming pawns in a massive global game, where the winners are only the most powerful entities on the planet. And at a time when most of us are already experiencing record high inflation, this is news that almost nobody wants to hear. But this is the reality we should all be taking steps to prepare for. Long story short, OPEC's restrictions are going to be implemented very soon in November. So that means we should all be prepared for a oil price hike, or in simple terms, an everything price hike. So if you're already feeling the pinch from inflation and you don't yet have a budget, now might be the time to do so. And the only people that will be excited about this price hike, anyone that owns shares in an oil company. If you like this video, you might also like the recent video we did about how the US dollar is heavily connected to oil. There is a link on your screen screen right now and a link in the description. Thank you so much for watching. We have an incredible newsletter of 75,000 people plus that are receiving extra financial gems written in beautifully written stories. There is a link in the bio. Also, like and subscribe. We would love to have you part of the community. And finally, we have a private membership, all things finance and freedom. There is a link in the bio to find out more, and we will see you in the next one.